Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Talking with people you admire is an interesting thing, especially when they're funny. But if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I am the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brains not only on current projects, but state of the business, how they got into the business, influences, any kind of fun stuff we can come up with during the conversation. It's a lot of fun, and if you want to have some fun with us, subscribe to the podcast, which you can do either over at Apple, over at Spotify, or you can find every single one of our episodes archived over at YouTube. We'd also love it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, please do not hesitate to follow us over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, where it all began with our hardworking team cranking out movie news and reviews left, right, and center all through this holiday time and all through this time when we need to be staying home a little more and finding stuff to watch. And that's what we're here for, and that's what we're going to do for you. But on this episode, we've got something for you to watch. And we've got something for you to listen to, too. Because we're going to talk about the new movie that hit VOD today called Boys and Girls. It's a Canadian indie comedy, and it is a lot of fun. It dials it back to the summer of 1990, and Camp Kindlewood is forced to go co-ed for the first time in its 77-year history. And let's just say the boys and the girls aren't necessarily all that happy about it, and it sparks sort of the age-old story of the battle of the sexes, and it's a lot of fun. And we talk with one of the stars of the film. We talk with a Canadian improvisational icon, Mr. Colin Mochrie, who is one of the stars of the film, and we talk about his involvement in the film and just sort of working with this amazing young cast, and just sort of how he got into the business and how comedy has evolved, and how he made it when he was 43, and just really in this business you just have to never give up and sort of keep plugging away if you sort of make a run at it and make a living at it. And it's really one of those messages that's important to hear, and have a few laughs along the way, because we hope you enjoy this one, because Colin is a funny guy. And enough of my blathering. Let's go talk to Colin.
All right, well, Colin, obviously, first off, I just want to say thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate the time today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now, I mean, obviously, congratulations on the film. I mean, I really got a kick out of it, because I don't often get to see you playing the straight man, which is basically what you were doing in this film. And it's really this sort of sly wink and a nod to sort of the 80s comedies of the past. And I'm kind of curious, how did you ultimately get involved with all this?
I wish I could say it was a long, drawn-out process, but Mike asked me, and I said yes, and it really was that simple. I'm constantly not being asked by people doing movies to do them. So when Mike asked, and he sent the script, and I liked the script, and I knew Kevin was going to be in it, and I knew a couple of the other actors. So I thought, yeah, I just love doing it. I love being able, if I, through Twitter or whatever, being able to put a spotlight on it if it needs. And just also, I like to encourage young filmmakers, young playwrights, whatever, to do what they do.
Well, and it's hard. I mean, because comedy is obviously so subjective, and I mean, but there is really a very smart edge to this film that still manages to be goofy all at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of Mike's script. He wrote this. It's loosely inspired by his experiences going to camp, with some, I think, slight or not so slight exaggerations. I think it actually happened at his camp that one year it became co-ed. And I don't think any of what happens in the film actually happened in real life, but I think that idea obviously stuck with him for some time.
When you're on a set like this, I mean, and it's a comedy, are you looked at as sort of the elder statesman? Like, do you sort of have to take on that sort of comedic mentorship role when you're doing a movie like this?
Well, um, that's hard to answer. I'm guessing yes. I mean, Kevin and I definitely were the fossils of the cast, and they did treat us with respect. But they were all extremely talented and extremely confident. So I think all we did was show a professionalism. We showed up, we knew the lines, we were supportive, um, and I think that's instead of being an inspiration comedically, we were more of this is how a professional acts.
Well, no, for sure. And I mean, it's got to be encouraging just to be able to not only be able to go onto an independent set, to be able to sort of exude that kind of professionalism, but just to be able to sort of impart it onto sort of a younger generation who have to take the reins and sort of do the job, as it were.
Yeah, I mean uh, it's comforting, I guess, that Whose Line has reached through the ages, and a lot of these young people knew the show and were fans of the show. So it was almost like I was their generation's Mr. Rogers, who just popped on set and then ran off somewhere. So yeah, so I'm obviously Whose Line has been very important in my life and has given me a career and some sort of focus. So it's nice and it's because of actually young people that it came back to the CW. They sort of discovered it on the internet through YouTube, and there was a sort of groundswell, and CW executives noticed and brought the show back. So I'm very grateful to the intelligence of the younger generation.
What do you think it is about Whose Line that I mean because all of its iterations are so timeless, and it really does sort of span sort of the eras, and it's never dated. It's always really comes down to sort of the pure essence of comedy rather than trying to be sort of situational or topical or timely, as it were.
Whose Line and get smarter for sure. Um, I think well, I think so many things went into the show's success. I think the cast, you can see how much fun we're having, and that becomes very contagious. And I think it's like it's weird. It's like a shared experience in an improv show. You and that audience are the only people that are going to be involved with that show.
Yeah.
Um, so it becomes a really unique experience. And I think the interactive part of it was, I mean, it had never been done before on television. So the audience really felt they were a part of it. They were invested in what was happening. And I think they just, it was just goofy. And I think that was its big appeal. I mean, if you transcribed any of the scenes from Whose Line, they really don't make sense. It's like you had to be there because it all depended on whatever we got from the audience or what Drew or Aisha or Clive gave us and what we did with it. But you could never transfer it as a sketch, I don't think, for Saturday Night Live.
No, and I mean it's that sort of energy that people always try to sort of recreate, and I'm kind of curious, how do you even try to translate sort of that energy of improv and sort of that spontaneity of the moment into something that's scripted here, like on Boys versus Girls?
Um, yeah, you have to. Well, I try to use the things I do in improv, which is basically listening, accepting, and trying to make the other person look good. So, it really um, ups my game when I'm doing a scripted piece, especially a movie. I haven't done a lot. And a lot of these young people have actually bigger resumes than me. So it was for me, it was like learning off of them too. So me, it was watching and learning and um, improvising, but it's a hard thing to explain, improvising, but not changing the words of the script. So it might be, I can say a line using a different emotion or with a different mindset, and it changes the intent, but it doesn't really change the intent. It changes the emotion, gives it more flavor, and it gives the actors you're playing with something to work with.
And I mean, this is always something I'm kind of fascinated by, because just throughout the history of comedy, I mean, there's always been different iterations and just how you do things and how you perform things. But I mean, I look at some of the people that we've lost. I mean, somebody like a Robin who is just was just such a pure genius on both sides of the aisle. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, just from an acting standpoint, it always feels like there's an advantage to being a comedian going into like a scripted piece, but there's also a disadvantage at the same time.
Yeah, I think well, and I think that's when you watch movies where comedians are doing serious um, parts, like many of the ones Robin did, or Jerry Lewis in uh, King of King of Comedy.
Right.
They tend to be more successful than dramatic actors who decide to do a comedy. I don't know if you saw Sean Penn and Robert De Niro in We're No Angels.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Well, um, God bless them. But and you know what? They've done well. They've done well anyway. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I think people don't give comedy so subjective. To make a group of people laugh at the same thing is a hard thing to do. And I think comedians are also in tune to all the different emotions, the ups and downs of the career of life, because they're looking at those things to try to make fun of them.
Yeah.
So they're more, I think, um, I think they're closer to their emotions and what's in their psyche, what is dark and what works. And I think they have easier access to that, if that makes sense.
No, and I think you're right because, and I mean, especially when it comes to like sort of dramatic acting versus comedic acting or comedians, you can hone a craft. You can teach someone to act and be a better actor, and you can teach someone to hone their jokes and to execute them better. But you can't teach someone to be funny. Like
Yeah.
that's really sort of an interesting sort of dynamic between the two.
Yeah, that's Mark Breslin always says you can teach someone to be funnier. You can't teach them to be funny. You gotta have that. And I mean, I know a lot of dramatic actors who are incredibly funny, and so different from what their stage personas show. So I mean, it's a great gift to have, and I think especially in this last year, having a facility for comedy, I think, has helped people sort of get through it.
No, that goes without saying, my friend, for sure. And I mean, I guess that kind of leads into my next question because I always like to ask people how they ultimately sort of got into this business. Because I mean, I'm always kind of curious. Is it the generic sort of moment of I went to an open mic night, or like how did you ultimately start in comedy?
I was in high school. I was very quiet. I was a bookworm. I was an honor student. My plan was to be a marine biologist. And a friend of mine dared me to try out for the school play. So I did, and I got it, and I got my first laugh. And that was it. I can still remember that moment. As I'm talking about it, I get the goosebumps. I just remember that. What is this? I want this all the time. And so I immediately changed my major to theater, and then did the long, long slog to become an overnight success.
So it was the influence of getting that laugh. It wasn't necessarily like a movie or a moment or a play kind of thing. It was just like, wow, this feels good.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always been a fan of comedies from, Chaplin and Keaton through, Dick Van Dyke, the Griffith Show, Monty Python, SCTV. So I certainly was drawn to that. But when I got that laugh, it was like, oh, okay, I think I can do this.
No, and I mean I love hearing that kind of story because it's one of those things that you never quite understand sort of how people have their career arcs. And I mean, people always think it is an arc when really it's probably more of a squiggly line to get to the point where they're at.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm making a living doing something that didn't exist when I was growing up. Nobody in high school said, you know what, I'm going to be an improviser. Because it was like, what's that? It's like, well, you make up stuff. And yeah, I mean, I've obviously Whose Line played a big part of that. but it was something I just loved doing. And still do. I've been very fortunate in that I've gotten to work with great improvisers all around the world. I've been working with a lot of younger people too that just keep you on your toes and sort of make me go back to the basics of improv um, and work at it. So it's been a great career for me.
Well, that's a beautiful thing, you know. And I'm just gonna like, oh, but I mean, it's one like, is there any person or any sort of point along your career that you can sort of credit to helping you sort of refine your skills, or is it just a question of practice makes perfect?
Yeah, it was a mixture of certainly practicing. The more you do improv, certainly the better you get at it and more confident you get. But I would steal basically from anyone who would make me laugh, from John Cleese to Eugene Levy, Don Knotts, Tim Conway, to friends that I have. I would, whatever would tickle me from their performance, I go, okay, why? Why is that going for me? Is it because it's so true, or is it because it's just goofy and weird? There have been a lot of people who have influenced what I do. So
Now, I mean,
there's a lot of blame to go around.
well, while working on Boys versus Girls, is there anybody sort of that you were like on set watching? Okay, this guy's got it, or these girls have it, these kids have it. Like, was there anything that sort of stood out for you? Any moments that went, okay, they might have a future?
Um, oh, God. Most of the stuff I was doing was crowd scenes. I had a couple of scenes with the youngsters in my office, which was
Yeah.
fun. And Jesse, I know, I've known him since he was doing Less Than Kind, is a great show if you ever catch it. And I've always been a big fan of his, so it was kind of nice to work with him and sort of goof around. And I mean, everyone else, I want to say to them something that I wish someone had said to me, that this life and this career especially really is a marathon, not a sprint. Um, I hate tell I mean, I hate telling them, because I can see the hope die in their eyes when I say, for me, I made it when I was 44, and you can just see them go, "What? I can't wait." But before that, I was having a great time. I was doing improv everywhere. I was doing shows everywhere. But if you want to be famous, sometimes it works overnight and sometimes it doesn't. Just do what you love doing, because that really is the important thing.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, it is such a special thing to be able to do what you love to do. And I mean, when I see comedy like this, it is all very obvious that the people involved sort of have love in it. And I mean, I think that translates through a lot of stuff you've done. I mean, from Whose Line to this. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, like, why have we lost, I guess, maybe the freedom in comedy, if that's the right word? Because I mean, there's freeness, there is that wink to the camera, there is that not being afraid to be sort of self-referential and silly while still following a story arc. And it feels like we've lost that, especially in sort of mainstream filmmaking.
Yeah. I don't know why. Um, I truly don't. I know there have been weird things in improvising where I've done a scene and said something innocent and people have gone, "Oh," and I thought, okay, what is that about? Somehow they've made some sort of politically incorrect thing in their mind that is, you really have to search to find. So I don't know if they're just trying to make it simpler, like make comedy simpler. It's like, well, why is that guy winking from me? One of my favorite moments in my life was when I was introducing my daughter to the road movies with Bob Hope
Okay, yeah.
and Bing Crosby, and she was like 10, I guess, at that point, and she was watching, and she goes, "My God, they look at you and they talk to you like some things are do today." And I said, "Yeah, there's nothing that hasn't been done in comedy." And these guys had the added thing of they couldn't swear, they really couldn't do sexual content above, slight titillation. So they had to be funny. and they had to find ways to be funny and sort of surprise the audience's expectations. In a way, it's gotten a little harder for us because everything has been seen. How do you change that? And I mean, I think that was the beauty of Schitt's Creek. It was
Yeah.
a sitcom that you thought, oh, it's going to be like this, and then it became something totally different that was positive, and which is rare. I think it's really hard to make a positive comedy, and they did it, and they made it funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about refining that execution and sort of twisting the knob just to the right spot to really give audiences something that, while like you say, there isn't anything new in comedy, but if we can tweak it just enough, it'll engage people, and it'll make them laugh, and it'll make them feel, and that's kind of the important part.
Yeah, and I think most of comedy comes from feeling. You can't sit down and go, I'm going to write a funny movie by doing what I think audiences will laugh at. It sort of has to come. And I think that was the beauty of this movie. Mike used a lot of personal experiences to come up with this movie. And, truth is funny.
No, and you're absolutely right. And I mean, there's nostalgia, there's truth, and there's honesty too. And I mean, I think that's really what makes it genuine and funny and really so enjoyable. And you know what? I'll just wrap it up. Say thank you again for the time today, Colin. This was a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
All right, thank you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.